but I'll zip through it. Okay, we are now recording. This is the website design lecture. So, website structure, first thing to remember, most users are going to go straight to the home page like Amazon.com. They're not going to remember these long, complicated individual pages. So because of that, that's how you structure your website. You assume you're going to get a lot of traffic on your home page or on other landing pages, and then you allow visitors to branch out from there. For example, somebody visits Amazon.com, they'll subsequently maybe look at categories and then pick individual products from there, or they'll use the search tool and find a particular product. Okay, and of course, different visitors around different paths may view different pages. I should be sharing. Okay, so there's that. Now we're good. Now I'm sharing. Okay, so sites can be well designed overall, but have problems on individual pages. The pages can be good. They can be set up together in a bad site, but you really need both. You need a good overall site structure and you need good individual pages. Otherwise, people are going to stop coming back. Now, what do customers want? Well, depends on what your customers are. The basic split is high income versus low income customers. So high income customers are typically going to use the internet to try to make shopping easier and are very likely to pay extra for convenience, right? They just want to be quick and done. And it makes sense, right? If your time is theoretically worth like $100 or $200 an hour, yeah, you don't want to spend like 5 minutes, 15 minutes chasing down, saving $1 on a deal somewhere. On the other hand, lower income customers, they're going to use the internet to search out bargains, compare sellers, all that. For example, they might spend a lot of time on eBay trying to find a particular item and scanning through all the different auctions, or they might go to Amazon and look at all the different third-party sellers and try to find the best price on something. Now, of course, in general, your high-income customers tend to be more profitable, but you can still make a living off of selling stuff to the lower-income ones. Now, all customers still, whatever they're trying to do, they still want to do it quickly, right? Even if you're somebody who's really hunting down a bargain on something, you still want that bargain hunting process to proceed faster. So that they still all have in common. And if you have one seriously bad experience, the customers might roll their eyes and say, we're not coming back here, right? This is what we saw a lot of in the early days of the internet. Set up a site, they'd spend a lot of money on advertising, customers would come to their site. For whatever reason, the site couldn't handle that much traffic because it was the 90s. And then people would say, oh yeah, I went to that site once, it collapsed. I'm going to try someplace else, right? So a lot of times you might only get one shot at a company. Now, it is also true that the tolerance for annoyance varies widely, right? But if you're one of these high income customers that you're trying to get stuff done quickly, yeah, you might very well not give a bad website a second chance. On the other hand, if you're more prone to looking for bargains, you'd probably be more forgiving. Anyway, so let's consider the next question. What makes a website bad? Well, there's the old line, I forget, it was Supreme Court Justice who was asked about a definition of pornography. And he said, well, I can't strictly define it, but I know what it is when I see it. This is kind of the same thing with websites, right? You can maybe not exactly define what a bad website is, but you know if you go to a website that's bad, you're like, oh, this one's not good. So things that go wrong. Number one, bad links or other things that are supposed to work, but they don't. Obviously, security warnings, right? You see a website listing in Google and it says this site has been known to have malware problems. Be careful about going there. That's going to make a lot of people think, maybe I don't go there. Other stuff, can't handle peak traffic, right? If it's busy, the site fails, yeah, people aren't going to want to come back there. Other things that are serious annoyances, right? If you have a very unique or very cluttered design, then people are going to spend a lot of time trying to puzzle through how it actually works. There was an old sushi place we used to go to. It had some screwy website design, but it's not up anymore. I used to show that in class, but the restaurant closed down, so it's not up there anymore. But you guys, again, you know when you see it, if somebody's trying to be too fancy with the website, and it just makes it hard to find what you're looking for. Other things, slow page load times. that was a big problem for MySpace back in the day. I don't know if any of you ever had a MySpace account, because it pretty much died out when I imagine the vast majority of you were still in single digits. But yeah, MySpace was what there was before Facebook. It was the big social media site. But the problem was people would pack in ridiculous amounts of content on their pages, and then if you had anything other than a high-speed connection, it was very, very, very slow. So that was a problem. Other things, desktop or mobile design mismatch, right? So if you went cheap and you only had a website design that was optimized for mobile or optimized for desktop, but didn't adapt to both, then that's going to be a problem too. I'll throw in one more example of a website that's bad. If you go to a retail site and it seems like really limited, like really skimpy, there's not a lot of products there, that's often a warning sign, right? So I had a thing, my son had a Star Wars lunchbox, one of those insulated ones, and I was trying to find a replacement for it because the guts on it broke up, and all of that insulating, I don't know, compound on the inside was starting to leak out. So I was trying to find a replacement, and I got this website that basically only showed that they had about 40 products. And I thought, this is really sketchy. And I tried to use my credit card on it, and there was something where it said, we can't process your card right now. Wait until the morning. And I was like, this whole operation seems really half-assed. I don't think they're legit. So I froze my credit card because I didn't want them, I was concerned enough about that. So bad website, not coming back. Okay. Some recent major badness. I don't know if you guys were paying attention back in 2013 when they rolled out the healthcare portal for the so-called Obamacare. It was kind of a train wreck. What happened? So the short version was the site was online. They couldn't handle anything like the amount of traffic they got, right? I mean, they should have known there was going to be quite a bit of traffic because first day, that's how it goes. But yeah, they couldn't handle it. And if you're interested, you can read the article. But I'm going to lift this one. Okay, let's see if I can. I'm trying to lift that. There we go. We'll see if this can work. I'm going to do it in internet, which is a thing. Let's see here. Okay. See if this page is available. It is not. Darn. Okay, well, they took that one down. Bummer. Okay. Sometimes the links aren't active anymore. I'll see if I can find a new copy of it sometime, but lecture slides. Anyway, the short version of it, conventionally, I'm really stuttery now. Okay, we're going to pause the record for a second. Something's weird's going on here. Okay, well, I'm still recording. I feel like max headroom now. Okay. Anyway, what happened with it was that they were planning on having each stage be ready at exactly the time for the next stage to start. So they were going to figure out what the site needed, figure out how they were going to implement it, and every part of that was going, and then do whatever testing they needed to get done. And they actually had planned that testing would happen while the site was live, right? So they would have everything up and running, and they assumed it was functional enough to run. Boy, I am stuttery here. They assumed it would be functional enough to run, but they have ongoing testing, and it just didn't work. Okay. Hold on. I don't know what's going on here. Everything's really screwy. Okay, well, we're going to try to keep going and hope that our connection is sufficient. Anyway, other stuff that happened. So here we have, if you want to check it out, there's some very bad websites from history. And again, here's a thing from a few years old, worst websites of 2014. Other things you might typically see out there, low quality clickbait pages, right? So pages that have dozens of ads per page, they load really slow. You have to go through a whole bunch of pages to reach the content. You might get some traffic on those first time around, but eventually people are not going to come back and they're going to get out of there as quick as possible. So sure, you get them to go to the first page, there's a chance they might accidentally click on one of the various, but chances are they're not coming back and they're going to be reluctant to click on more clickbait pages in the future. Okay. All right, I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the video here. So I'm gonna, okay, we're back. Video was really stuttery there for a minute. Go back to the PowerPoints, okay. Looks like it's good now. That was strange. Okay. So next question we might ask, why do bad websites happen to good businesses, right? If you're a good business, how come they don't have a perfectly fine website? Well, typically the problems happen because website design isn't a priority. Businesses are focusing on their operations. They're not worrying about how people get to the business itself. So things like never redesigning a site, right? Your website might have been great in the year 2000, but if you let it sit for 20 years, it's going to look really dated. You might be a small business that doesn't have any site design experience. You might be really cheap, right? You might say, well, we don't want to spend much money on this. We're not going to contract with a professional website development service. We're just going to have my nephew, who's like a first-year student in web design, he's going to do it. Or even management doesn't recognize the problem, right? Because how do you count the customers that you've lost? Other things. So people, if they, have the intent of making a good website, but they don't really think about it, right? So number one, assuming that no news is good news, right? If nobody complains about the website, then you think it's still good. Well, not always the case. Another thing, never actually, excuse me, never actually using your own site. So people from the business, they set up the website, they assume it's fine, but they never visit it. And so they never figure out what the problems are. Novelty for novelty's sake, if you just want to do something different and fun, but customers don't like it. And last, neglecting older hardware and software, right? It's very possible that you design a website that works great on brand new machines, but if machines that are 5 or 10 years old, it doesn't work at all for them. And that may be a significant fraction of your visitors. Interestingly, this is one of the things you see on a lot of government websites. For example, the federal tax processing website, it only runs on Microsoft Explorer, right? So if you had Microsoft Edge, for example, you couldn't do things on the site in that. So it's very weird. And like the Social Security Bureau, if you're putting in like end of year Social Security data, it's a really, really weird, old, screwy website that, it looks like it was designed once in the 90s and never touched again. So a lot of government sites actually tend to be the opposite problem. They tend to work only for older machines, older hardware and software. Okay, so bad design, last words. Remember, your site is the front entrance to your business, right? For a lot of customers, it's going to be their first exposure to your business. So appearance matters, functionality matters, and performance matters, right? All three of those are important. And it doesn't necessarily have to be excellent, right? Your website doesn't have to be a jaw-dropping work of art, but it's really awful. It will drive customers away, right? So the example, suppose you are a restaurant. People aren't going to come to your restaurant because, the parking lot is very clean, right? They're not going to say, oh, hey, let's go to that restaurant because the parking lot is clean. No, you go there for the food. If you go to the restaurant and the parking lot is really dirty, the front door has a whole bunch of cobwebs on it, and you go inside there and it looks like the carpet hasn't been vacuumed in 6 weeks, then yeah, people are saying, maybe their standards of hygiene here are not the best, right? It's the same thing with a website. So 2020, if a business can't design a decent website, you would probably have legitimate concerns about the quality of its internal operations. You'd be like, what are they doing here? This website is terrible. Maybe other aspects of their operation are terrible. And in particular, information security. You think, wow, they're really out of date on this website stuff. Maybe they're pretty out of date as far as security as well. I don't know if I want to trust them with even my credit card information. Okay. We are really having some problems here with the flicker. I don't know if you guys are getting flicker, but I'm getting a lot of it. Okay, well, let's talk to the other side here. What makes a website good? The overriding concern is having a good user experience, right? Being able to easily see, find the information, technical performance, like how fast the pages load and being compatible with your hardware, and then aesthetics. Basically, if people are able to get to the website, easily find what they're looking for, everything goes quickly, there's no hangups, and the site looks reasonably good, then people are going to be happy. That's what they want from a website, right? So some secondary concerns, having natural layout, but just like common sense, what's natural to one visitor may not be exactly natural to another. So often what we're looking for is conformance to industry standards, right? So for example, they first came out with the shopping cart concept for online retailing in the 90s, and it's a pretty good and sensible system, and eventually everybody adopted it. You go to a lot of websites and you can see they're basically following Amazon's lead in a lot of ways, right? So that style and setup of the site looks a lot like Amazon. That way, you know, the people know, the businesses know everybody's been to Amazon. Everybody knows how that site is up. They're familiar with it. So they'll do that same process. They'll set up their website the same way so that customers have an easier time finding what they're looking for. Last one, flat versus deep balance. So what we mean there is how much information you put on a particular page. So for example, you go to Amazon, Amazon carries literally 3 billion products worldwide. That's a lot, right? There's no way they're putting all that, or really even a non-trivial fraction of that, on a single page, right? They want to have basically one product on a page, or they'll set up a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory that maybe has like 10 or 20 products. That's the flat versus deep balance. So if you're flat, that means you have, within like a few clicks, you can get to any product. But that means you're going to have a whole lot of products on any particular page. You don't necessarily want to do it like that. On the other hand, the deep balance, you don't want to set it up so that customers have to click 30 times to find the product that they're looking for, right? And a lot of the way they get around that, having that search feature where you can find a particular product you're looking for. But still, some customers do say, well, I want to look in a particular category and see what they have. You want to make it pretty easy for customers to find that. So you do a couple clicks to get to the particular subcategory you're looking for. And then once you get to that page, Amazon presents you with a list of particular products. You can scan through them. For example, one I did just lately was finding a filter for a shop vac, you know, one of those big round vacuum cleaners used to vacuum out cars. Anyway, so I did a little bit of searching on there for products, and then boom, get to the page, there's a listing of like, you know, several dozen filters, one of which was the one I was looking for. So found it. Okay. So good layout. Simple thing, don't overwork site visitors, right? So first thing to consider, where do your eyes focus when you go to a new page? Well, typically they're going to be either at the top or anywhere that you just clicked. And anything especially eye-catching, right? So then the next thing to consider, how your eyes absorb content. Well, typically same direction as reading, right? Left to right, top to bottom, and they're going to look at headers first, right? So if they're headers, you're going to look at them, and then if it's relevant, you're going to actually read the text. So, and within reason, right, you want as much as possible available on that page. So if people are using a desktop, you can assume they have a pretty big screen. You want to show the important stuff. Mobile devices, it's a little trickier. Chances are you're not going to be able to put everything on one page, but you do want to pick the important stuff and have that be visible. Okay, so we're going to take a pause here. Here we go. We're back. Back to our slideshow. Okay, so next. Now, a good example is Google, right? Google has a wonderful layout. It's very easy to get what you want. So, but we can consider this again in terms of flatness versus depth. So for a typical search, you'll often find millions of matches, right? If it's a very common one, if you just search like money or sports or something, you'll find literally several billion. I think the most I found was for sport. I found 20 billion search results, but they're not going to give you all that. You actually only typically get a few or at most several hundred matching results, and they're broken down on different pages, right? Google doesn't even give you all X hundred search results on the same page. So Google knows a typical user only views a few of those search results, right? Ideally, Google is able to give you the best result in the first, 3 or 5 search results. So most users never even look at the second page. So that's one example of how Google can adapt this, right? If they could show you all the search results, but that would take a very long time to deliver, right? Even a super fast connection, it would take a very long time to deliver all of those many gigabytes of data. So they don't want to show you all of them, and they don't even want to display a full subset because, again, that's probably more likely to just confuse the visitor. It'll take a long time. They say, you know what, our algorithms are good enough. We can just show you the first few, and for most visitors, that's fine. So consequences of this, right? Number one, what's the most valuable ad space? Well, typically at the top, right? Typically at the top, typically on the first page, because that's where users' eyes go. The least valuable, well, typically at the bottom of the page, because people have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to even see it. And even less valuable than that, any ads that run along with search results that happen on second pages, right? Secondary pages. So Google, again, in terms of layout, they have their own issues to deal with. We'll talk about this more in the second module where we talk a little bit about Google's advertising. So how they arrange search results versus ads, right? Now, if you've used Google, you've surely seen that they have blocks of ads at the top or at the side, and they identify them and say, this is an ad. On the other hand, Google also wants to deliver good search results, right? So they make money off the ads. They got to show you some, but they don't want to pack the page so full of ads that people have trouble finding things they're looking for that are not ads. Other things, how Google responds to ad blocking software. Do they still show you the results or not? Do they show you a different set of results? And then how it works in terms of revenue. So Google has the choice of saying, you can run an ad and Google only gets paid if somebody clicks on it, or they can also do an impression model where Google gets paid anytime anyone even sees the ad. So that's what impressions are. So Google's advertisers do get to make that decision, but of course, Google had to opt in to let them make that decision, right? Google could have said, anytime we show an ad, you're going to get charged for that. Okay. So conformance, we've talked a little bit about. Basically, once other sites settle on a way to do things, you probably want to follow along with that, right? You don't want to reinvent the wheel on your own site and impose a learning curve on your users. It's just going to make them grumpy and frustrated and less likely to come back. I mean, sure, maybe you do have a slightly better idea, but is it better enough to be worth that hassle? Okay, so this is why you see a lot of standard tools on web pages like navigation tools or drop-down menus, social aspects, things like media links, user comments, Facebook likes, they all end up being in about the same place. Even the styles of the menus and the content grids, the way the various panels on the homepage are laid out, they all tend to have a certain sameness to them on a lot of the big sites. Okay, so for example, if you want to compare, go to Target.com, Amazon.com, Walmart.com, you'll see there's a lot of things in common. Okay. I do have this, if you want to take a peek at how aesthetics have changed over the last many, many years. We'll take a peek at this. Okay, so I think this is what you should be seeing. Do you guys see the web page now? I hope you do. I don't want to. It's locking me in. I start my free trial, sure. Oh, I don't want to do this. You bastards. Okay. Well, that's fine. We're going to stop that share for a second. We're going to return back to, well, I was hoping I could get through and there wouldn't be some kind of blocking there on it. Okay, well, it's fine. You couldn't see it anyway, so that's good. Thank you for responding. All right, well, anyway, you can look at that on your own time, but I could show you how Amazon looked in 1995, but it's a relatively dated site. It obviously looks very different from how it does now. Newer styles, though, they're, well, you know what new websites look like. So they'll have graphics, but typically what you'll see on a landing page for a more boutique-y kind of site, there'll be a big background image and just a few little links on the home page, right? Whereas if you go to Amazon now, there'll be like a massive grid containing several dozen items that hopefully you're interested in, and you'll click on one of them, or they have the navigation tools up at the top. That's the typical pattern now. Okay, so okay, next one. Colors. This is something that will actually be highly relevant for our JavaScript. So if you've been paying attention for this long, this is a little nugget of something that we will be extensively using. So 16 color palette was fine in 1996. If you've ever used the older version of Excel, you'll know that there's a very limited set of colors you have. They did eventually come out with 256 color palette. It's 24-bit, right? So that means you can have combinations of 3 levels of red, green, and blue between 0 and 255. Okay, so each one of those is a number between 0 and 255. You bundle them together and it makes a color. Okay, so here we have some ones. Think of them as 3 pairs of what are called hexadecimal numbers. So an is actually a 15 in a base 16 system. So 0 for red, 0 for green, 0 for blue means there's no luminance, right? So luminance is how bright that aspect of the color is. And right, black is the absence of color. So if all of those luminances are set to 0, there'll be no color, it'll be black. Likewise, right, if you remember from 5th grade science where you break up the white light into the component colors, works the other way. If you blend them all together, if you red to a high luminance, green to a high luminance, blue to a high luminance, if they're FF, that's 255 for each of those pairs, then you get as bright as it's going to be. You get white. And in the middle, right, 80 in hexadecimal, that's 128. So that's a moderate amount of red, moderate amount of green, moderate amount of blue, and you get gray. Okay, and likewise, if you want to do blends, for example, if you just want to do red, very bright red, you could do FF for the red value, 0 for green, 0 for blue, and that will give you red. If you wanted to make purple, you could do FF for red, 0 for green, and FF for blue, right? So you have high luminance on red and blue together make purple. That's how that works. Now, many of you may be wondering right now, hey, I thought you have red, yellow, and blue together, and that makes the colors. Well, on computer screens, it's different. On computer screens, you use red, green, and blue, and we could have a whole fun talk about that sometime. If people are interested, I can post some links that explain it better than I do. I don't really retain that in my head, but the short version of it is what works for paint, right? Red, yellow, and blue doesn't work on computer screens. So the 3 combo colors are red, green, and blue. Okay. Next thing, fonts. So there are some people that get really hung up on fonts and whether headers should have serifs, right? Those little tabs at the ends of letter strokes, or they should be sans serif, right? From French without serifs, like Arial doesn't have any. Some people get really hung up on fonts. I don't, but some people do, whatever. Size though, size matters, right? Because people will generally assume that the bigger the font, the more important it is, right? So headers tend to use bigger fonts. And yeah, the smaller the font, people say, oh, this is less ordinary text. So when people are skimming a page, naturally they're going to look for the headers that are going to be in big letters, probably in bold. So the other thing for websites, often you should ask yourself, is this text really necessary, right? In most cases, Users will prefer to look at a set of pictures rather than a lot of text, right? So there's a reason why Amazon, they have a grid with like 100 items. People want to see the stuff. That's what people like. If they wrote a description of every item, that would not be nearly as engaging. Even sending out the images requires a lot more data. So pictures, people like them, especially with mobile devices, right? The text can be pretty small. People get aggravated. They get eye strain. Too much text just generally feels cluttered. You look at it, you're like, wow, there's a lot of words on this page. It's hard to find what I'm looking for. It's going to take a while. I don't want to do this. Now, sure, when you get into the individual product pages, there has to be text there describing stuff. But until you get there, try to use pictures as much as possible. Okay. Packing in terms of aesthetics, right? So one question is how much content there is versus how many links. And this is the same old depth versus flatness issue. So one issue that comes up, the more stuff you pack on each page is going to affect how quickly the pages load. And if pages are loading slowly, then customers are not going to like that. On the other hand, if customers have to click 40 times to get to anything they're interested in, they're not going to like that either. You have to find some sort of happy medium. Other thing, ads per page, right? The more ads you pack on a page, sure, potentially you can get more revenue, whether it's by clicks or by impressions, but it's going to also have a negative impact on repeat visits. If the page is super packed full of ads, people are not really going to want to come back, especially because having more ads per page often makes a page load slowly. The example I always use in class is Yahoo Finance. If you see Yahoo Finance, let's do a stop share on this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring up Yahoo Finance here so you can see what I have. We're going to use, where is my, there we go. Boom. Okay. And we can see how slowly the page loads, right? So finance. Okay, now that loaded pretty fast, but you'll see there's a lot of stuff on the side here, and I'm trying to scroll through, and you'll see that because there are so many ads, even ticker symbols are taking a while to get pulled up. And if I scroll down, there's more ads it's working on. The ads do slow it down, and it depends on the time, but that wasn't too bad today. Some days are better than others. Okay, so we're gonna go back then. Anyway, but the more ads you have, the slower your pages are going to load. And I'm sure we've all experienced that with clickbait type pages. Other things, depending on the hardware you're using and depending on your connection type. For example, if you have 5G, then you can download a page that has a lot of stuff on it very quickly. But on the other hand, it's not going to matter if you're still extracting ad content from third-party sites and their servers are slow, and it takes a while to come up with that. And until you grab those ads from those outside sources, you don't construct the page and deliver it. So depending on how your whole system is set up, connection speed could help a lot, or it might hardly help out at all. There can also be other sorts of hardware incompatibilities. I remember about 10 years ago, there was a new color scheme in the ads called Aero, A-E-R-O, and on my slightly old desktop, anytime I ran into a page that was using that new Aero graphics style, the whole page would grind to a halt for about 30 seconds while my hardware tried to process it, and then it would just stop, right? It would stop, the browser would just shut down. So that was a frustrating thing, and I stopped visiting those pages for a while until I got a new machine. Okay, let's try to keep going on here. So, loading speed. Load speed is really, surprisingly, one of the very important things in site performance. You might think there's not a huge amount of difference between a page loading in 0.5 seconds or 0.6 seconds, but at the scale of companies like Google or Facebook, it is. I forget the exact number. I haven't looked it up in a couple years, but if I recall correctly, Google estimated that every 1/10 of a second in page load speed time corresponded to a 1% drop in basically in revenue, right? 1% drop in page visits. So if they're, you know, this is why for a smaller operation like Bing, right? Bing isn't super concerned about that. They're not going to have a whole lot of money to spend on making their system really fast, because even if, even if they get everything fast, 1% of Bing's revenues isn't that much, right? Bing is maybe 5% of Google's business. But Google, they're doing like $200 billion a year almost in advertising revenue. So they can afford to spend a lot more money keeping everything fast. If Google says, oh, we're going to let it go like a tenth of a second slower and lose a percent, that 1% of Google's revenues there is about $2 billion. That's a lot of money. It's very much worth it for Google to keep their system running fast. Okay, so I have a couple links here if you're interested. This is one from about 10 years ago, but still, it's Google's philosophy of speed. And here's another one about Facebook, right? It's really impressive how Facebook delivers so much content so quickly. Part of it, too, is the way that they compress the graphics to send all those out. Okay, so loading speed factors, what happens? Well, the big stuff, the big drag is by images, and in particular video, right? Images take a lot of data to send, especially if they're high quality images. Video, being basically a sequence of images, also takes a very long time. So things like images that are too big or require too many colors, all that is going to mean more data. Compression effectiveness. So typically the big sites like Amazon, they don't send you all of the data individually. They zip up the page and send that all to you, or they compress all the graphics and send that out for much faster delivery. And to the extent that they can compress it effectively, that's going to help out a lot. The frame rate, right? If you're watching a video and the frame rate is relatively slow, that's going to take a lot less data than if you have a super high frame rate, like 40 frames per second or something. So, for example, on Facebook, right? In Facebook, where there's a video embedded in your feed, initially you'll just see it as a single image. And if you're not interested in it, you just roll right past it, and Facebook never really has to deliver the full video to you. Likewise, if you do click on it, the initial assumption is you'll watch it in low resolution. If you watch it in high resolution, yeah, Facebook will deliver that, but they're not going to deliver that unless you specifically ask for it. And the reason why they do that is to keep the pages loading quickly. And of course, other things like not caching images or other content in the browser, right? So anytime you load a web page, if there are images that are going to be reused throughout that website, they'll cache it, try to store it locally in your browser, so that the next time you go to another page, you don't have to reload all that data, which again, helps the pages load a lot faster. Okay, other things, embedded external media. If there's anything on your website that you have to pull from some external source, whether it's ads or some other kind of content, that's going to delay things, because you're going to have to wait for that content to get delivered before you can deliver it to your users. For example, I'm not sure exactly what's going on Amazon, what's on Yahoo Finance, but if you were watching, you saw it took several seconds for those cryptocurrency figures to show up. And chances are that means they're pulling them from some outside source, and until Yahoo gets them from that source, they don't have them there to hand off to you. Okay. The other issue that's a little bit more subtle, sometimes companies will write a page that gets optimized for writing the page, not for actual page viewing. So sometimes it'll be, well, we just have to get this page slapped together quick, and if it doesn't work that well, we'll go back and fix it sometime. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they just wanted to get the page out quickly, but it's not really optimized for how people are going to view it. So, okay. Typical issue, page hanging, right? You go to read an online article, the page loads, you read the first paragraph, and then for whatever reason, the page stops responding, right? If that's a pervasive thing on a website, you'll probably stop going to that website. So, common causes on that, number one, too much stuff going on with your browser, right? Your browser's trying to do too many things at the same time, has too many tabs open, doing too many things on the tabs, can't quite keep up. Incompatible media, like I talked about with the arrow graphics example in ads, sometimes there can be very long scripts or scripts that are poorly written, right? So they get trapped in an infinite loop or something close to it. that can happen. I'm sure we've all seen that thing where you load a page and it's taking a while to do something, and then eventually a dialog window pops up and says, this page is having a, is being slow because of a long-running script. Do you wish to continue? Sometimes client-side security procedures, right? If you have some active security tools, you go to a website and the website has a lot of objects embedded in the page, then your security tools are going to scan each of those objects, and that can take a little while. And of course, the last really bad one, malware installation attempts, right? So sometimes having the page hang for a while is one of the tricks that malware does to give it enough of a delay so it can download the file and implant it on your machine. So they say, well, the person is just going to think the page is hung up for a while, and during that window, we'll be able to install this malware. Okay. Graphics requirements, right? So everybody likes graphics, but there are trade-offs, right? So if you have better graphics, all else equal, the page is going to load slow. Likewise, if you have videos embedded on your page, you should be sure that people are actually watching them, right? So you'll have web analytics to track that, see what people are doing. Now, of course, if the hardware and connection speed permit it, customers in most cases much prefer graphics over text, right? People typically spend more time watching TV than they do reading books. That's just the nature of humans. And looking forward, what we'll certainly see more and higher quality media, right? So 5G is the thing now. That's going to vastly increase how much data can be pushed through on mobile connections, but connection speeds across the board are going up. On the other hand, again, too much of a good thing sometimes, right? You can have people using old devices that is not really compatible with what the graphics are trying to do. Another issue is the networks get more prone to overloading, right? If you're trying to send out too much data, because instead of sending text, you're sending out a lot of graphics, or you're sending out high quality graphics or even high quality video, yeah, it can be overloaded. In fact, I don't know if you guys were around, but on Monday, we had severe problems with this on Blackboard. Basically, Blackboard was down all day. I'm going to assume because of the high volume of traffic for the first day, probably a lot of instructors using video through Blackboard. One of the reasons why I prefer to use YouTube, YouTube is always up. Blackboard's mostly up, but not always. And of course, dollars for data usage, right? The more data you're sending, eventually in some fashion, you're going to get charged for that. Okay, the company will, not the users. Okay, let's see. We got, I'm going to take a drop out from the slides here. See how far along we have. Yeah, okay. So we're almost done here, just a few more slides. I'm going to pause the recording. Look at that. Okay. Okay, so performance, desktop versus mobile. So desktop users, they're typically sitting, typically using a mouse, have a big screen and a fast wired connection. You can scroll, it's going to be a little bit annoying. You don't really want to scroll, right? You're like, why did I pay money for this 29-inch monitor and now I have to scroll like an animal? Mobile users, on the other hand, they're potentially mobile, probably using a touch screen. The screen is small. They might have a fairly slow wireless connection, right? There's a lot of other people sharing it. And scrolling is entirely expected, right? If you're using a mobile device, chances are you're not going to see everything you want on the screen at that immediate time. So, hello? Okay. How do those drive site design? Well, let's talk. Well, if you're coming up with a mobile app, right, or a mobile website, you're going to have to spend a lot of time thinking about how the different parts of the screen relate to each other, right? How users are going to travel from one part of the site to another. On a desktop, on the other hand, you don't have to worry so much about that, right? You're going to say, well, pretty much everything we want, we can put on this one page. So if you're using Facebook, for example, if you're using it on a desktop, everything you want is going to be right there, right? It's all going to be visible on the screen. If you want to go someplace, you click on that, it brings you to a new page that once again shows you about everything. On a mobile device, though, you're only going to see a little bit at a time, right? You're going to see just a couple entries in your feed. If you want to see more, you got to scroll a lot. There's going to be little buttons at the top and in the corners where you can go to other aspects of Facebook. You're going to have to put in a lot more time thinking about how the different parts of your website are going to be displayed to your visitors. Okay, security. Basic principle, more security means worse performance, right? Anything you're trying to do in terms of security is going to impose costs and delays and annoyances on people. They're not going to like it. On the other hand, security is good. So there's some kind of happy medium once again. So on the server side, you can see issues like excessive security, like having secure HTTP on all pages. Hold on. Yes. Oh, hello. We can all say hi to my daughter who's, hi, sweetie. What's going on? Oh, good. You got the pacifier in here. Good job, sweetie. Okay, well, I'm doing a lecture, but, okay, be careful with that baby. Okay.
Why did she fall?
I don't know. I don't know. I think her babysitter is not very good at what she does. Okay. Bye, sweetie. Okay, so that's my daughter. She likes to Zoom bomb us. Anyway, on the client side, for example, yeah, daddy's doing stuff. On the client side, again, there are security issues, but you don't have a lot of, what's the word? You don't have a lot of leverage in affecting user behavior, right? So you can suggest that they do various security, follow security practices, but in the end, you don't have much control over that. So yeah, one of the things that Google does, for example, it'll display a warning if a site is somehow compromised, or Google says it has a history of being compromised, but they're not going to block you from going there. If you really want to go there, you can. Okay. Continuous improvement. So continuous improvement is an operations principle that says, basically you attack the big problems first, fix them. Once those are fixed, you go after the smaller problems. And you repeat that until the problems are so small that you can't seriously or effectively pursue them. So how is that applicable to site design? Well, number one, technology is going to make new features practical, right? So very basic one, flashback to 1995, most websites did not have a search feature. You know, number one, they didn't really need them because what they were selling was not that extensive. And number two, the search technology didn't work all that well. It would find exact matches, but if there were similarities, inexact matches, it did not work very well for that. And it was relatively slow. But new search technology gets developed. Businesses are able to help users connect to a much wider variety of content. Other stuff, maintaining hardware compatibility, right? You don't necessarily have to make sure that your website still runs for, say, an ancient Windows 95 machine, but you don't want to say, this website is only going to be accessible by brand new machines either, right? There's some kind of happy medium in there. Changing customer preferences, that's always going to happen. One of the things businesses do is they periodically roll out new versions of the site. So they'll change aspects of it. They'll do tests on customers. They'll see, does this version of the site somehow play out well better than the old version? Companies like Facebook do this a lot too. One of the basic things they do is they figure out what mix of ads people will tolerate in their feed, right? So if Facebook finds that by bumping up the ads in your feed by like 5%, your actual engagement drops off, you spend less time on Facebook, they're gonna say, oh, we went a little too far, let's dial that back. Okay, so customer preferences, they gotta track that. And of course, as new products, new problems, as offerings expand in various ways, so whether it's Amazon stocking new products or new kinds of products, or Facebook bringing in new apps or new other new features on their site, Google maintaining an increasingly large volume of web pages, all that kind of stuff, they have to keep continuously updating their service. Okay, so got a few links here about Facebook and their continuous improvement. You check those out if you like. But I think this is a good time to call it a day. So I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to pause the recording. Let's bring it back. Okay, so this concludes the lecture, but if people have questions, we're now going to take a break for questions.